Hi, this is Willie Nelson from NORML. For 30 years, NORML has provided a voice for the millions of Americans who smoke marijuana responsibly. More than 500,000 Americans are arrested each year for smoking pot. These are ordinary citizens like you and me, whose lives and careers are being needlessly destroyed. To learn how you can help, contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, normalaudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back to the Audio Stash. Today, it is Monday, May 14th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us at NORML to end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit NORML.org to get involved today. We have a great week of programming planned for you here on the Audio Stash. We're going to focus in on this extremely busy state legislative reform season. We'll speak with Gabriel Saya of the Drug Policy Alliance, Ray Warren of the Marijuana Policy Project, and our own senior policy analyst at NORML, Paul Armentano, to highlight all the different state legislative reform efforts dealing with marijuana happening around the country right now. Make sure you get involved with local reform. Visit the Take Action Center at the NORML.org website and find out if there's marijuana legislation happening in your state. Then send some emails, make some phone calls, and get involved with reform. Also this week, we'll speak with Philippe Lucas of the Vancouver Island Compassion Society, and we'll also speak with Dr. Robert Malamede of the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. Philippe and Dr. Bob are both testifying before the British Columbia Supreme Court in a constitutional challenge to the federal medical marijuana program in Canada. It's a very important case that could have some broad implications for Canadian medical marijuana. So it's going to be a very busy week with lots of guests here on the Audio Stash. We'll also get some great summer music in for you as well. Let's open up our stash today with news from NORML. Our news today. Wisconsin Legislative Committee to vote on industrial hemp exploration bill. Wisconsin's Assembly Committee on Rural Economic Development will hold an executive session this coming Wednesday to vote on Assembly Bill 146. Assembly Bill 146 seeks to authorize a committee to evaluate the economic benefits of industrial hemp and report its findings to the legislature. According to a 2005 U.S. Congressional Resource Service report, the United States is the only developed nation that fails to cultivate industrial hemp as an economic crop. Hemp is a distinct variety of the plant species Cannabis sativa that contains only minute or less than 1% amounts of THC, the primary psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. Farmers worldwide grow hemp commercially for fiber, seed, and oil for use in a variety of industrial and consumer products, including food and clothing. In recent years, several U.S. states have commissioned studies recommending hemp as a viable economic crop. A study by the University of Kentucky estimated that local farmers could earn roughly $320 per acre growing hemp for straw and grain, and $340 an acre from growing certified hemp seed. Similar state-sponsored studies in Illinois and North Dakota concluded that hemp's profit potential warranted immediately amending state and federal law. Accordingly, 3 states, North Dakota, Montana, and West Virginia, have passed legislation legalizing hemp cultivation by licensed farmers. NORML is asking supporters in Wisconsin to take a moment today to contact their representatives, as well as members of the Assembly Committee on Rural Economic Development, and tell them how important it is that they support Assembly Bill 146. In addition, supporters can call members of the Committee on Rural Economic Development and urge them to vote yes on Assembly Bill 146. Contact information for the committee is available at NORML's website in the Take Action Center. We have links to it at normalaudiostash.com.
What's up, guys? This is Miss High Times 2007, and you're chilling with us here at the NORML Podcast.
Next up today, we're going to speak with NORML's Executive Director, Alan St. Pierre, about the upcoming 2007 National NORML Conference. Alan St. Pierre, NORML's Executive Director, welcome back to the Audio Stash today.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Alan, it's great to speak with you today. Now, tell us a bit about the annual conference this year.
Well, it is going to be NORML's 36th annual conference, and yes, it is going to be in Hollyweed, if you will. There are over 100 medical marijuana dispensaries or cooperatives within a 10 square mile of where the conference will be. So we have tried to ensconce ourselves right in the middle of where marijuana enjoys its most quasi-legal status in the United States.
This is really, the conference is going to happen in the epicenter of the entertainment industry here, Alan.
It is indeed, and so the theme for this year's conference is cannabis, creativity, and commerce. And I can't think of a place I visit in the United States where those 3 things come together like Hollywood.
And who are some of the speakers and presenters going to be this year?
Well, we know that Tommy Chong and Rick Steves are going to be speaking. We're giving an award this year to Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy and one of NORML's biggest and longest supporters, though it looks like we're probably going to have to go out to the mansion to engage in that little soiree. It doesn't sound like we're going to be able to get Hef and the whole road show to come on over to the conference. And we've asked Donald Abrams to come and speak this year. I haven't heard back from him regarding his schedule, but we're hoping he can give us one of his great lectures on his most recent studies on medical marijuana. Well, we certainly have many NORML board members and staff speaking. As always, there will be dozens of folks who represent other drug policy reform groups, ACLU, Drug Policy Alliance, SSDP, SAFER, Marijuana Policy Project. All groups are well represented at NORML conferences.
And Alan, while this is the NORML conference where members of the 140 local chapters come together with national staff, it is also, as you mentioned, has all these other reform organizations involved as well. So this is really the event for serious marijuana reform advocates.
It is. It has been going on for now almost 4 decades. It is if one had to think of this in a metaphor, it is like a hub, and NORML serves as that hub, and the spokes are all the activists that go out to a functional wheel that just kind of keeps rolling down the path of reform. So we have the only general public conference. There are other conferences that deal with marijuana, but they're invite only. And this is one where if you're a citizen and you want to come and listen to lectures on marijuana and be involved in the debate, the discussions, and the social activities, then the NORML conference is virtually the only place in America where concerned citizens can come under one big tent.
Now, Alan, with Steve Bloom and in the mainstream media, we've seen a lot this year of celebrities there in the Los Angeles area expressing their support for marijuana in one way or another. So having the NORML conference in L.A. could also allow a whole lot of celebrities the chance to learn about medical science and legal reform as well.
I think it is. We're going to do some advertising locally. I'm going to certainly try to get as much as what's called earned media as possible in the area and invite many different reporters and columnists from the many entertainment TV shows and magazines. But One other thing I think will really cement bringing out celebrities this year is NORML is in negotiations with High Times to bring their infamous Stony Awards out to Los Angeles in coordination with this year's NORML conference. And for a better part of 10 years in New York City, High Times has been putting on the Stony Awards, which is an award ceremony for and a celebration of marijuana and the movies. And they've done a great job in New York for all these years. And Steve Bloom, myself, and some others over at High Times are really excited about bringing Stony Awards to NORML's conference in Los Angeles.
We're going to talk more about this conference as it gets closer. Alan, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Alan St. Pierre is NORML's executive director. Everyone can sign up for the NORML conference at norml.org. You can hear some of the talks and presentations from the 2006 NORML conference in San Francisco at norml.org/podcast on the NORML events feed.
Hey, is it 420 yet? This is Rick Cusick from High Times Magazine, and you're tuned into NORML's Audio Stash.
We're going to highlight a talk that Philippe Lucas gave at the 2006 NORML conference in San Francisco. The 2007 NORML conference is coming up in October. If you want to rub elbows with some A-list celebrities, as well as everyone here at the NORML Foundation, the NORML Legal Committee, NORML's national staff, here's some incredible talks and presentations about medical marijuana and marijuana law reform, well, then you need to head out to the NORML conference this year in Los Angeles. Again, it's happening this October. We have links for more information up at our website today at normalaudiostash.com. If you plan on going, get your rooms early. There are only so many smoking rooms at the hotel, and believe me, they're going to book out first. So for more information about booking your trip to the NORML conference in Los Angeles, visit our website today at normalaudiostash.com. Here's an example of what you'll find at a NORML conference. This is Philippe Lucas talking about the history of Canadian marijuana prohibition at the NORML 2006 conference in San Francisco.
Like the federally controlled programs in Holland and the U.S., our nation's federal cannabis policy has been a source of controversy and concern since its implementation in 1999. But let's step back for a moment and begin with a brief introduction to cannabis prohibition in Canada, because although our medicinal cannabis program is administered by Health Canada, in other words, it's a health concern, it's not separate legislation from our federal drug laws, but rather it's an exemption from prosecution under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, which is also known as the CDSA, which outlines the laws and penalties associated with the recreational use of cannabis. Although there's a pervasive popular misconception that Canadian drug enforcement is quite lenient, that over 30,000 Canadians get charged with cannabis possession every year, and that nearly 1 million Canadians, that's in a population of 30 million people, have criminal records as a result of cannabis possession charges. The enforcement of cannabis prohibition costs Canadians over $340 million a year. And interestingly enough, despite leading Canada on other aspects of harm reduction, British Columbia, where I currently live and work, has more cannabis-related arrests per capita than any other province. Canadian cannabis prohibition casts a wide net, and in this climate of active enforcement, it was inevitable that legitimate medical cannabis patients would get ensnared and unjustly persecuted. In the 90s, a couple of them decided to fight back by challenging the constitutionality of our broad and indiscriminate illicit drug legislation. In 1997, Jim Wakeford was charged with cultivation for growing cannabis to treat the symptoms of his HIV/AIDS. And although the court initially denied Mr. Wakeford's request for legal protection by citing the existence of the Section 56 of the CDSA, which is a single paragraph in our Controlled Drugs and Substances Act that allows the Minister of Health to legally exempt a person or organization from persecution, a later court granted him an exemption when it was revealed that there was actually... Which brings us to Terry Parker. Terry Parker was arrested in 1997 for the cultivation and possession of cannabis, which he was using to treat severe epilepsy. In Regina versus Parker, the Section 56 exemption process was deemed unconstitutional because A, no pharmacist could actually fill a prescription for cannabis since there existed no legal source, and B, the process gave unfettered discretion related to a matter of personal liberty to the Minister of Health. The Ontario Court of Appeals declared the prohibition on the possession of cannabis to be constitutional and of no force in effect. They quite literally struck down all of cannabis prohibition in Canada, but then they suspended the declaration for 1 year's time in order to give the government time to amend the law to include adequate exemptions for medical use. The government responded by appealing the decision and then by introducing, literally within the 12 hours before this decision would have struck down prohibition in Canada, they introduced the Medical Marijuana Access Regulations, or MMAR, on July 30th of 2001. There are essentially three components to Canada's federal medical cannabis program. We've got the administration, production, and research, and all of them are administered by Health Canada's Medical Marijuana Access Division, or MMAD as it's otherwise known. Let's begin with the administration of the program and the critical issue of access. The Medical Marijuana Access Regulations are intended to codify the use of medicinal cannabis within a bureaucratic regulatory approach. The stated goals are to allow compassionate access to medicinal cannabis for legitimate users and to avoid diversion to the black market. In reality, the MMAR simply outlined the arbitrary conditions under which one can avoid prosecution and arrest through an onerous and poorly considered federal application process. Let's have a look at it. Originally, there are three condition-based categories within the MMAR, all with their own specific requirements. Category 1 was for terminal patients. If your doctor thought that you were going to die within the next 12 months, you simply required a doctor's recommendation to access the program, which, by the way, could take up to 3 months to process. Category 2 was for patients with the conditions with symptomology that's generally recognized to be helped and alleviated by cannabis. That includes HIV/AIDS, MS, glaucoma, and cancer. And for those conditions, you required the recommendation of your doctor and or a specialist. And Category 3, that was kind of a catch-all for all other conditions, and that's where I fall in. I suffer from hepatitis C, and so hepatitis C patients, people with chronic pain and fibromyalgia, they all required the recommendation of 2 specialists. Now, you can imagine if you lived in a tiny town in the middle of northern BC or northern Iowa, if you tried to find 2 specialists to recommend cannabis for hep C, you won't even find 2 specialists. Ontario Court of Appeals responded to a lawsuit by medical cannabis users and distributors known as the Hitzig case by declaring the program unconstitutional once again and making 4 specific changes to the MMAR, including striking down the regulation that limit the number of producers allowed in one location, as well as the number of legal users per grower, while also allowing producers to be financially compensated for their work. These changes were specifically tailored by the court to allow for the community-based production and distribution of cannabis through specialized outlets like dispensaries and compassion clubs. The court also struck down the second specialist recommendation from Category 3 as arbitrary and overly onerous. In a perfect example of bad faith exhibited by the government in regards to this program, Health Canada immediately reversed this high court decision by actually reinstating the restrictions on designated growers verbatim. They didn't even have the creativity to change the language that had been struck down by the courts. This selective interpretation of the Hitzig decision puts the program back into a very questionable constitutionality and legality, and it essentially guarantees that the work of compassion clubs and dispensaries will remain unregulated and therefore illegal. This decision is yet to be challenged in court, but it's the focus of a number of court challenges right now. So what are the specific problems with access? Although Health Canada estimates there's over 1 million Canadians currently using cannabis for medical reasons, only 1,186 patients have managed to register in the federal program over the last 5 years. Now, I just want to compare this to the Oregon state-run medical program, which over the same period of time has registered 15,000 medical users, despite having 1/10 the population of Canada. Now, this low rate of registration is largely due to an onerous application process and reluctance by physicians to act as gatekeepers for the program. Because although many GPs support the use of cannabis for certain conditions, warnings from their representative organizations like the Canadian Medical Association, the BC College of Physicians, and the Canadian Medical Protection Agency have rendered the federal program and cannabis supply all but inaccessible to most legitimate medical users. And now a little bit of background on the government's cannabis production plan and facility. And the slide that I'm showing you right now is actually how, as a medical cannabis user, you receive your cannabis. It comes in a sealed foil pouch. In December of 2000, Prairie Plant Systems, a Saskatchewan-based cultivator of fruit trees and ornamental plants, won a 5-year, $5.7 million contract to produce cannabis for distribution and research by the Canadian government. They soon thereafter began cultivation of cannabis in an abandoned zinc and copper mine 500 feet below Grand in Flin Flon, Manitoba. In 2005, an environmental watchdog group called the Pollution Commission for Environmental Cooperation ranked a Flin Flon smelter as the top producer of lead and mercury air pollution in all of North America. Although safeguards are apparently in place to protect cannabis production facility from these environmental contaminants, the public perception is that this is clearly a poor location to be growing anything at all, especially a medicine, to be distributed to seriously ill Canadians. Contrary to the intentions of her predecessor, Alan Rock, then Minister of Health Anne McClellan initially refused to distribute this cannabis. She cited lack of safety and consistency with the PPS product, and until July of 2003, the MMAR was found unconstitutional by yet another court for what the court called the illusion of supply, and Health Canada is ordered to begin the distribution of this cannabis to legal exemptees. And so in August of 2003, the first few ounces of federal cannabis are sent to legal users. Less than a month after Health Canada shipped out its first package, the Vancouver Island Compassion Society had the PPS product independently tested. Now, despite being labeled 10% THC, it came in at just over 3% THC, about the same as the NIDA cannabis coming out of Mississippi. These tests are later confirmed by the Quebec Institute of Public Health Toxicology Lab, which rates the government cannabis at 5% THC on 2 separate tests. Additionally, extensive THC analysis conducted by Health Canada in May of 2004 showed that in over 20 tests conducted by 3 different labs, this product never measured above 7.2% THC, and in fact it averaged well below 6% THC. By comparison, cannabis cultivated by the compassion clubs in Canada consistently comes in between 15% and 25% THC. In addition, the high levels of molds, mildews, and other biological impurities detected on this is a high world. Now, this situation has even led to criticism from our Conservative Member of Parliament. This November in the House of Commons, he stated that, and I quote, "The government-run marijuana grow-up in Flin Flon, Manitoba has been a bust. The crop has little medicinal value and may be corrupted by mine contaminants. Will the health minister shut down the operation, or will taxpayers continue to be shafted?" Additionally, Health Canada has consistently ignored evidence suggesting that different strains of cannabis have different therapeutic effects, choosing instead to make only one strain available to exemptees and frustrating many end users who insist that their health conditions are not addressed by this particular cannabis product. Furthermore, although Health Canada recommends not using this medicine in smoke form, it currently offers no alternatives to loose-leaf cannabis. And by comparison, as you can see on this slide, compassion clubs follow a philosophy of harm reduction and of increased options for end users, and thus we offer multiple methods of ingestion, including edibles, tinctures, oils, and in some cases, even oral mucosal sprays, like the Vicks Cannabis that you see in the back of this slide. Feedback from end users of this cannabis product suggests that this long list of concerns has real merit. A Freedom of Information request has revealed that out of the original 93 exemptees who received this cannabis, nearly 30% actually returned it, physically sent it back to Health Canada. In fact, returns are so frequent that PPS now includes a cannabis products return goods authorization. However, and check this out, once the product is open, Health Canada doesn't issue refunds anymore. So this is a nonsensical policy akin to having a restaurant refuse to compensate a customer for an inadequate meal if they've actually tasted the food in question. As a result of this misguided distribution plan, it's recently been revealed that nearly half of the 278 licensed cannabis are now in arrears to our federal government for $170,000. Medical use users from this supply, which is Canada's only legal supply, effectively forcing these folks right back to the black market for their medicine. I've talked to 2 of these folks, and one of them has an inoperable brain tumor in the back of his eye, and the other one has a Canada for payment cut off from this federal supply. And so let's move on to the government's research agenda, or more specifically, the lack of research going on in Canada. Because despite the implementation of a 5-year, $7.5 million clinical cannabis research program, very little research is actually taking place in Canada. Over the last 5 years, only 3 federally funded clinical research protocols have been started, and one of them. And to make matters worse, I recently discovered that the Canadian Institute of Health Research suspended the entire clinical cannabis research program in June of 2004, citing that they could not guarantee funding past 2005, and as a result, there is currently no federal funding available for clinical in 3.5 years into its mandate. By comparison, over the last few years, compassion clubs, including a recently published nausea and pregnancy survey with the University of Victoria and UBC, I presented that earlier today, and additional research currently initiated or involving compassion clubs includes a federally funded Canadian AIDS Society study on the human rights, legal, and ethical concerns facing people living with HIV/AIDS who may wish to use patrons of compassion clubs, and North America's first high-THC, smoke cannabis, and chronic pain project. As we have central lecture of indifference, incompetence, and bad, and that's why the VIX and so many others are working to promote a medicinal cannabis program based on science, reason, and rather than fear and misinformation that currently influence these failed federal policies. But how do we get there from here? The following are 5 steps that would certainly help move the Canadian program in the right direction. We need an immediate audit and review of the entire federal program, and I'd suggest the U.S. program needs the same thing. We need re-implementation of the Ontario Court of Appeals changes to the MMAD. We need to re-empower the medical community by decentralizing this program to allow for immediate access to cannabis with a physician's recommendation, much as you have here in California. We need an adoption of regulations allowing for the community-based production and distribution of cannabis. And we need to urge Health Canada to follow the advice of the Senate Special Committee on Legal Drugs by establishing a cooperative relationship with compassion clubs and dispensaries in order to increase safe access and to advance research into the therapeutic potential of cannabis. I'd like to finish by thanking NORML and all of those who worked so hard on this conference, and all of you guys for your time, interest, and support. I look forward to your questions if we have time. Thank you very much.
That was Philippe Lucas at the NORML 2006 conference in San Francisco. For more information about our 2007 conference for NORML happening in Los Angeles this year, you can visit our website for a link at normalaudiostash.com.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep a land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
That was Danny Fong with the Canadian National Anthem, O Canada. We found that up at podshow.com. We have links to Danny Fong on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
755,000. That is a big number to be sure, but do you know what this number represents? It signifies the total number of citizens in America arrested on marijuana charges in 2004. That's right, 755,000 of your fellow citizens were arrested on marijuana charges. That's an arrest every 40 seconds, and 9 out of 10 of those arrested are for possession-only charges. Does continuing marijuana prohibition make sense to you? It certainly does not to the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws and its members. I'm NORML's Executive Director, Alan St. Pierre, and if you too think that it is high time to end marijuana prohibition and replace it with a tax and regulate policy, please join and support NORML's 36-year legislative efforts to reform our country's misguided marijuana laws. You can learn more about NORML or become an active supporter by calling toll-free 888-67-NORML, NORML, or by visiting us on the web at norml.org.
Listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com.